I see the tears you hide behind closed doors. I know how the silence of the room wraps around you like a cold blanket, how the phone waits silent on the table, and the hours stretch into darkness. I understand the weight in your chest when they left, mother, father, spouse, and how the absence carved a hollow space that echoes with every heartbeat. This pain that makes you ask if you will ever feel whole again, if you have been abandoned not just by people, but by God Himself. I have known it too, and I promise you, there is a path through this desert, a hidden spring waiting to be discovered in your deepest solitude. I have watched it happen in my own life, how the most crushing loneliness became the doorway to the most profound companionship. The very emptiness that tortures you now can become the vessel that holds a peace beyond understanding. Not through some magical escape, but through a gentle turning inward, where silence becomes teacher and solitude becomes sanctuary. It was during the darkest period of my life, when I had lost everyone I loved, that I first encountered the crushing weight of solitude. The faces that once surrounded me like stars in a familiar constellation had disappeared one by one, some through death, others through betrayal, many through the natural drift of life's currents. I found myself alone in a house that had once trembled with voices and laughter. The walls seemed to mock me with their stillness. The floors creaked beneath my feet, as if speaking a language of abandonment I was just beginning to learn. At night, I would reach across the empty space beside me, my hand finding only cold sheets where warmth had once greeted me. During meals, I would catch myself preparing food for two, setting the table as if someone might still walk through the door. These habits of companionship became small daggers, each one opening the wound afresh. I began to dread the sound of my own footsteps, the echo of my own voice in prayer. I felt not just the absence of others, but something deeper and more terrifying, the absence of meaning itself. The question that haunted me then, the same question that perhaps haunts you now, was simple but devastating. How can I continue when I have no one to continue for? Without witnesses to my life, without hands to hold mine, without eyes to reflect back the truth of who I am, do I even exist? In those long months of isolation, I felt myself becoming a ghost, translucent and forgettable, even to myself. The pain was not just emotional, but physical. A heaviness in the limbs, a constant pressure in the chest, as if solitude itself had weight and substance. I tried what you may have tried, distracting myself with constant noise, with frantic activity, with desperate prayers that felt like stones dropped into a bottomless well. I sought counsel from teachers and texts. I made pilgrimages to holy sites. I begged God for company, for relief, for some sign that I had not been utterly forgotten, but the silence persisted. The emptiness remained. And in that unrelenting void, I began to hear something unexpected, not comfort, not answers, but a different kind of invitation. It was in Kenya, on a winter night so cold the air seemed brittle enough to break, that I finally stopped fighting the solitude. I'd been reading by candlelight, the ancient texts blurring before my exhausted eyes. I closed the book and simply sat, too tired even for tears. And in that moment of complete surrender, when I had given up the struggle against my aloneness, something shifted. I began to feel the solitude not as an absence pressing in, but as a presence unfolding outward, not as a prison, but as a vast, uncharted wilderness waiting to be explored. What conventional wisdom could never have taught me, what I now share with you as sacred truth, is this. Solitude is not the absence of relationship, but the beginning of the most important relationship you will ever have. The emptiness is not a void to be filled, but a space being prepared for a greater fullness. I began to approach my solitude differently, not as a punishment to endure, but as a hidden sanctuary to enter with reverence. Each morning, I would sit in silence for the time it takes water to boil, simply feeling the texture of being alone. I would place my hand on my heart and count 5 slow breaths, acknowledging the life still pulsing within me, independent of anyone else's recognition. I would speak aloud one truth that remained unchanged despite my losses. I am here. God is here. This moment is enough. Gradually, something miraculous began to happen. In the silence where I had heard only abandonment, I began to hear a more subtle music, the rhythm of my own true nature, the whispers of divine companionship that had always been present, but drowned out by the louder conversations of daily life. The empty room became not a symbol of what I had lost, but a sacred space where I could finally hear the quieter voices of wisdom that speak only when all other voices have fallen silent. Let me tell you the truth that transformed my understanding forever. God does not shout over noise. God whispers in silence, and it is often only in complete solitude that we become quiet enough to hear this whisper. What you experience as abandonment may actually be invitation, an invitation to discover the companionship that has been with you from your first breath, the presence that never leaves even when all other presences have faded. I remember walking alone by the river one dawn, after months of this practice, and feeling suddenly that I was not alone at all, that each step was accompanied, each breath witnessed, each moment held in a greater awareness that included but infinitely transcended my own. The solitude had not ended, but it had transformed. It was no longer the enemy, but the doorway, no longer the wound, but the medicine. This is the paradox I offer you. Today, the truth I learned through tears. The deepest solitude, when entered willingly rather than resisted in fear, becomes the very path to the most profound connection. The emptiness, when embraced rather than fled from, becomes fullness. The silence, when listened to rather than filled with noise, becomes the very voice of God. Try this simple practice. Tomorrow, instead of running from your solitude or numbing it with distractions, set aside 10 minutes to sit with it consciously. Place your hand on your heart. Feel your breath moving in and out. Say aloud, "In this solitude, I am not alone. In this emptiness, I am being filled. In this silence, I am being spoken to." Then simply wait, with no expectation except presence itself. Remember my words when the loneliness feels overwhelming. The cup must first be emptied before it can be filled with something new. Your solitude is not a punishment, it is preparation. Your emptiness is not abandonment, it is the necessary space being created for a greater fullness to enter. Your silence is not absence, it is the first syllable of a conversation more meaningful than any you have known before. Trust in this process of sacred emptying. Have faith in this path of holy solitude. The very pain that seems to prove you are alone is actually your guide to discovering that you never were and never will be. This is the faithful discipline of the heart, to trust the emptiness as much as the fullness, to recognize the divine presence in absence as well as in abundance. The order you seek is already unfolding, not despite your solitude, but through it. I promise you this, not as distant comfort but as lived truth. The silence will speak. The emptiness will fill. The solitude will transform into the most faithful companionship you have ever known. But you must not flee from it. You must enter it willingly, with open hands and heart, ready to receive the wisdom that can be whispered only in the quiet. I remember the morning I found myself kneeling on the hard floor of my room, hands trembling as they tried to gather the broken pieces of a clay pot that had shattered when I stumbled in the dark. In that moment, looking at the fragments scattered across the tiles, I saw myself, broken, scattered, seemingly beyond repair. Perhaps you know this feeling too, the sense that something fundamental within you is shattered, whether through grief or betrayal, through addiction or failure, through the slow erosion of hope or the sudden collapse of everything you counted on. I understand how it feels to look at the pieces of yourself and wonder if anything whole can ever emerge again. The world tells us that strength means never breaking, that the powerful are those who remain unscathed by life's storms. But I learned something different as I knelt there among those fragments, as my fingertips traced their jagged edges and my tears fell upon their dusty surfaces. I learned that brokenness itself contains a mysterious power, that the very cracks we try so desperately to hide are actually the places where the light enters most purely, where grace finds its easiest pathway into the soul. I know you carry a weight of shame about your brokenness, I can feel it in the way you hold yourself, in the way you hide certain parts of your story, in the way you apologize for needing help or for not being over it yet. I want to ask you a question, and I ask you to be honest with me and yourself. Do you believe your brokenness makes you less worthy of love, less capable of meaningful contribution, less valuable in the eyes of God or others? If this touched something real inside you, if you recognize this struggle, write in the comments. My brokenness is not my shame, but my pathway. When you share this, you're not just freeing yourself, you're lighting a candle for someone still walking in darkness. Your courage to speak truth may be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. For years after the death of my beloved friend Shams, I carried my grief like a secret illness, something to be hidden lest others see my weakness. I composed poetry during the day, but wept alone at night. I offered wisdom to students while feeling hollow inside. I spoke of God's mercy while wondering silently if it extended to my own broken heart. This double life exhausted me. The masks became heavier than the pain they were meant to conceal. Then, one night, as I sat by the window watching moonlight transform the garden, I heard the reed flute being played in the distance. The sound was so penetratingly sweet, so unbearably pure, that it broke through my careful defenses. I began to weep openly, without restraint, allowing the music to draw out all the grief I had tried to contain. And as I wept, a realization dawned like slow moonrise. The very hollowness I was feeling was what allowed the flute to make such beautiful music. It was not despite the emptiness, but because of it, that such sweetness could emerge. This understanding struck me with the force of revelation. Strength does not come from being unbroken. It comes from how we carry and transform our brokenness. The reed must be cut, hollowed, and pierced with holes before it can make music. The wheat must be crushed before it becomes bread. The oil must be pressed from the olive. The most nourishing and beautiful things in our world come not from wholeness preserved, but from brokenness transformed. I began to observe this truth everywhere. The most compassionate people I knew were those who had suffered deeply. The most wise were those who had failed greatly and learned from it. The most authentic teachers were those who spoke from their wounds rather than from abstract principles. Everywhere I looked, I saw this paradox confirmed. It is not the unbroken who change the world, but the broken who have allowed their brokenness to become a channel for something greater than themselves. What I am telling you contradicts everything the world values, but I offer it as truth-tested in the laboratory of my own heart. Your strength is not measured by your ability to remain unbroken, but by your capacity to make your brokenness sacred. The question is not whether you will break, all humans do, but whether you will allow the breaking to become an opening for greater light, greater love, greater wisdom to enter and flow through you. In the months that followed this realization, I began a practice that changed everything. Each morning, I would place my hand over the center of my chest and name aloud one broken place within me. I name my grief for Shams. I name my doubt in darkest nights. I name my fear of being forgotten. Then I would add these words, and I open this broken place to become a doorway for the light. I did not try to fix the brokenness or hide it or rush its healing. I simply acknowledged it and then reimagined it not as a defect but as an aperture through which divine love could more easily enter. The transformation was not immediate or magical. Some days the practice felt hollow, the words mere sounds in an empty room. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. The broken places did not disappear, but they became less like wounds and more like wells, deep places where waters of wisdom had gathered, sources I could draw from when speaking with others who were suffering. I found myself able to sit with the pain of others without needing to fix or flee from it, because I had learned to sit with my own. The greatest surprise was how this practice affected my relationship with God, where once I had approached the divine with elaborate prayers and rituals, trying to appear worthy and whole, I now came simply and honestly, carrying my brokenness like an offering. "Here is the truth of me," I would whisper into the dawn, not the self I wish I were, but the self I actually am. And in that naked honesty, I felt a closeness to the divine that had eluded me in all my years of more polished devotion. God, I discovered, is not impressed by our wholeness, which is largely illusion anyway, but is irresistibly drawn to our broken places, the way light naturally flows through cracks, the way water naturally finds the lowest point. The divine presence does not demand our perfection, but only our permission to enter through our imperfection. This is a mystery the proud can never understand, but that becomes clear to anyone who has truly embraced their own brokenness. God is never closer than when we are broken open. I offer you this practice from my heart to yours. Tomorrow, find a quiet moment and place your hand over your chest. Name one broken place within you, not to fix it, not to hide it, but simply to acknowledge its existence with compassion. Then say these words: I open this brokenness to become a doorway for love to enter. Repeat this practice for 7 days, noting any subtle shifts in how you carry your broken places. Remember this truth: when shame tries to convince you that your brokenness disqualifies you from meaningful contribution, the wound is where the light enters. Your very brokenness, when embraced with courage and offered with love, becomes your most authentic gift to a world full of people pretending to be whole. Your cracks are not flaws in the vessel, but designs in the lampshade, allowing the inner light to shine through in patterns of unexpected beauty. Trust in this mystery of sacred brokenness. Have faith in this alchemy that transforms wounds into wisdom, heartbreak into heightened compassion. The order of the universe includes breaking as an essential phase of growth, not as failure, but as necessary opening. This is the faithful discipline of the heart, to neither deny the breaking nor be defined by it, but to allow it to become a channel for something greater than our small, defended selves could ever contain. I understand the weight of the empty purse, the heaviness of the unpaid bills stacked on the table, the knot in your stomach as you look at your children and wonder how you will provide. I have felt the shame that comes when you must count every coin, the fear that whispers in the dark hours about tomorrow's bread, the doubt that questions whether God sees your struggle at all. This burden of material scarcity, I know its taste, its texture, its persistent presence in every decision and prayer. During the years when I wandered from city to city after leaving my position of privilege, I came to know hunger not as a concept, but as a companion. The rumble of an empty stomach became a familiar sound. The calculations, how to make 3 coins last for 7 days, became a daily meditation. I watched my clothes grow thin at the elbows, my shoes develop holes that let in the cold and dust of the road. I learned to sleep in doorways when no shelter was offered, to wash in rivers when no bath was available, to smile and give thanks for a single fig when a feast had once been my daily expectation. It was on one such day, when my pockets held nothing but air and my stomach reminded me hourly of its emptiness, that I sat by a roadside well, watching travelers come and go. A merchant stopped to water his mules, their backs laden with rich fabrics and spices bound for distant markets. He nodded to me, just another dusty dervish, without really seeing me, and something inside me broke open. Not with envy for his abundance, but with a sudden piercing question. If I had nothing material to give the world, what then was my purpose? If I could not provide even for my own basic needs, what value did my existence hold? I closed my eyes, feeling the sun warm on my face, and turned this question over and over, like a stone worn smooth by the river. And in that silent asking, a memory surfaced, a teaching from one of my earliest masters who had said, "The birds neither sow nor reap, yet their song makes the whole. Forest, rejoice." I opened my eyes and saw a small bird perched on the well, its feathers unremarkable, its size insignificant. Yet when it began to sing, the travelers paused in their hurry, their faces softening into smiles. In that moment, I understood something that transformed my relationship with scarcity forever. Material provision is only one kind of abundance. The universe operates through many economies simultaneously. The economy of money and goods, yes, but also the economies of beauty, of wisdom, of compassionate presence, of authentic truth-telling. While I sat there counting my lack in one economy, I was overlooking my abundance in others, the words of poetry forming in my heart, the insights earned through suffering, the presence I could offer another lonely soul. This realization did not magically fill my purse with coins or my bag with bread. The material scarcity remained a real challenge that required practical attention. But it shifted my perception of that scarcity from a comprehensive judgment on my worth to simply one dimension of a multifaceted existence. I began to ask different questions. Not just, how will I get what I need, but what do I already have that might serve another? What abundance exists within me, even in the midst of this particular lack? If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. Let me share with you the counterintuitive truth I discovered through my years of material struggle. Scarcity is not the opposite of abundance. It is a doorway to discovering a different kind of abundance. When one channel of provision narrows or closes, it often forces us to notice and develop other channels that had been there all along, unrecognized and underutilized. The very constraints that seem to limit us can become the precise conditions needed for new gifts to emerge. I remember a winter in Damascus when the cold penetrated even the thickest walls, and food was scarce throughout the city due to failed harvests. I was staying in a small room provided by a patron of poetry, but even his generosity could not create bread where there was none to be had. For 3 days I ate nothing but a thin soup made from boiled herbs. My body grew weak, my mind foggy. I could barely rise from my mat. On the 4th morning, desperate and dizzy with hunger, I wrapped my thin cloak around me and ventured out into the streets. Not knowing what else to do, I began to recite poetry aloud as I walked, not for coins or food, but simply because the words were there, pressing to be spoken, and I had nothing else to give. A small crowd gathered, drawn not by spectacular performance, but by the raw authenticity of a man speaking truth from the edge of physical collapse. When I finished, a woman approached with a small loaf of bread, the last in her home, she later told me, and pressed it into my hands. "Your words fed something in me," she said simply. "Let this feed something in you." Others came forward with small offerings, an apple, a handful of dates, a cup of milk. Not one of them was wealthy. All were facing the same scarcity. Yet, in that moment, a different economy revealed itself, the economy of mutual recognition and care that exists beneath the more visible economies of money and goods. I share this not as a strategy for getting your needs met, but as a glimpse into a mystery that our anxious minds often miss. Provision often comes not through the channels we desperately watch and worry over, but through doorways we did not even know existed. It arrives not when we have perfected our schemes for acquiring what we lack, but when we offer genuinely what we already have, regardless of how insignificant it might seem in the face of our perceived needs. This is the paradoxical truth that contradicts our instincts in times of scarcity. The path to provision often begins not with calculating how to get more, but with finding what we can authentically give from exactly where we stand. Not as strategy or transaction, but as honest participation in the circulation of gift that sustains our shared life. This is not magical thinking. It is a practical recognition that we exist within multiple systems of exchange simultaneously, and that blockage in one system does not necessarily mean blockage in all. Try this practice when scarcity grips you with fear. Take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, list everything you genuinely need right now, not wants, but true needs. Be specific and honest. On the right side, list everything you already have that could be of service or value to another person, not just material goods, but qualities, skills, presence, insights, time. Look at both columns with equal attention and respect. Then ask, how might my authentic giving connect me with authentic receiving in ways my anxious calculations cannot foresee? I practiced this in my own way during those lean years. Each morning, I would name aloud both my material needs and my available gifts. I need food for today. I need shelter from the cold. I have words that speak truth. I have presence that witnesses pain. I have hands that can work. I have a heart that can listen. Then I would go into the day looking for where my gifts might be needed, trusting that my needs would be addressed through channels I might not be able to predict or control. The result was not instant prosperity or an end to material challenges. But gradually, steadily, I found myself participating in a web of provision that operated by different rules than the marketplace. I discovered that when I stopped obsessing over what I lacked and began offering genuinely what I had, whether to individuals or to the world at large, paths opened that my anxious mind could never have calculated. Not through magic, but through the natural laws of reciprocity and connection that operate when we step out of isolated fear and into authentic participation. Remember this truth when the bills pile high and the resources run low. Scarcity reveals the channels of provision we overlooked in abundance. The very constraints that seem to be crushing you may actually be guiding you toward gifts, connections, and sources of sustenance that would have remained hidden in easier times. Your lack is not a punishment or a permanent condition. It is a temporary teacher, showing you aspects of abundance you have not yet recognized. Trust in this economy of grace that operates beneath the visible economies of transaction. Have faith in this circulation of gift that continues even when conventional channels of provision seem blocked. The order you seek is already present, not despite your scarcity, but through it, inviting you into a more comprehensive relationship with abundance than mere acquisition could ever provide. This is the faithful discipline of the heart, to trust the invisible currents of provision even while honestly facing the visible evidence of lack. I see the chaos of your days, the scattered attention, the fragmented efforts, the constant movement that yields so little fruit. I understand the exhaustion of beginning again and again, only to find yourself circling the same mountain, returning to the same emptiness. I have known this restless searching, this desperate doing that somehow never becomes being. The sun rises and sets, weeks blur into months, and still the heart remains unsettled, the soul unfed, the life untransformed. You have tried so many paths, read so many books, started so many practices, yet the peace you seek remains elusive as morning mist. I, too, wandered through years of spiritual hunger, accumulating teachings like a collector of rare objects, displaying them proudly, but never allowing them to change me from within. I traveled from master to master, shrine to shrine, practice to practice, always seeking the spectacular revelation, the dramatic transformation, the pathway that would require no patience or persistence on my part. I wanted enlightenment without discipline, wisdom without routine, transformation without the mundane faithfulness of daily practice. It was during the third year of my studies in Aleppo that I encountered a humble gardener who would become one of my greatest teachers, though he never claimed such a title. Each day at dawn, I would pass his small plot of land on my way to the mosque for morning prayers, and each day, without fail, I would find him already at work, kneeling in the same corner, tending the same plants, performing the same simple tasks with unhurried attention. One morning, frustrated by my own lack of spiritual progress, despite all my elaborate practices and prayers, I stopped to question him. "Every day I see you here, doing the same things in the same way," I said, not bothering to hide my impatience. "Don't you ever tire of such repetition? Don't you long for new gardens, new methods, some more exciting path?" The gardener looked up, his face weathered by sun and years, his hands dark with soil. "I have been working this same small plot for 27 years, he said simply. "In that time, I have learned everything I need to know about God, about life, about the soul." I must have looked skeptical, for he smiled and continued, "The soil teaches patience, how transformation happens in its own time, not mine. The seasons teach acceptance, how to work with what is given rather than demand what is not. The plants teach attention, how to notice subtle changes that reveal the health or distress of living things. The weeds teach discernment, how to distinguish between what nourishes and what depletes. And the daily returning teaches the most important lesson of all, that spiritual growth happens not through spectacular events, but through humble faithfulness to a few simple practices performed with full presence day after day after day. I left that morning humbled, but not yet convinced. It would take many more years of restless seeking before I finally understood what the gardener had been trying to tell me. The paradoxical truth that contradicts all our spiritual impatience is this: the path to the extraordinary is through embracing the ordinary. The doorway to the freedom we seek is not through constant novelty, but through deepening relationship with a few essential practices. Look at any master of any craft, the musician, the calligrapher, the potter, the baker. What do they all have in common? Not a desperate search for new instruments or tools or techniques, but rather a profound commitment to the fundamentals, practiced daily with ever-deepening attention. The musician plays the same scales each morning, finding infinity within those few notes. The calligrapher draws the same basic strokes thousands of times, discovering new dimensions of beauty in their subtle variations. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. Mastery comes not from quantity of practices, but from quality of attention brought to a few essential ones. I eventually discovered that the spiritual life operates by the same principle. After years of complexity, my own practice distilled down to 3 simple elements, performed faithfully each day: conscious silence, ordered action, and attentive service. Not as rigid rules imposed from without, but as loving rituals that created the conditions for inner transformation. Not as magic formulas guaranteeing specific outcomes, but as faithful containers capable of holding whatever life brought with greater clarity and peace. Each dawn, before the world's noise could colonize my mind, I would sit in silence for the time it takes a small candle to burn down one finger's width, not striving for spectacular visions or insights, just resting in awareness, feeling the breath move, noticing the mind's activity without being captured by it. This simple practice, performed with as much presence as I could muster, gradually changed my relationship with my own thoughts. I became less identified with them, less driven by their urgent commands, more able to discern which deserved attention and which could be allowed to pass like clouds across the sky. Following this silence, I would perform one act of physical ordering, making my bed with precise care, arranging my writing materials for the day's work, clearing and cleaning the space where I would receive visitors. This was not about perfectionism or rigid control, but about bringing consciousness to the material dimension of life, about treating physical space as a reflection of inner state. I discovered that the outer order created subtle but powerful conditions for inner clarity. When the visible environment was arranged with care and intention, the invisible environment of the mind naturally followed suit. The third element was a conscious act of service, identifying one specific way I could be useful that day, whether to an individual, the community, or the natural world. Some days this was elaborate, like preparing food for travelers or composing poetry for a celebration. Other days it was minimal, like carrying water for an elderly neighbor or removing stones from a pathway to prevent others from stumbling. The specific act mattered less than the intention behind it, to shift attention from my own needs and desires to the needs of the greater whole, to remember my place in the vast interdependent web of being. I offer you this pattern not as a burden or a should, but as a gift and a could, a simple structure that creates conditions for the transformation you seek. Try this. For the next 7 days, commit to these 3 elements, adapted to your own circumstances. Begin each day with 10 minutes of silence, sitting in a designated place, following your breath, anchoring your awareness in the present moment rather than in yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's anxieties. Then perform one act of physical ordering, making your bed with full attention, arranging your workspace with care, clearing one small area of clutter or dust. Finally, identify and carry out one specific act of service, however humble, that shifts your focus from self to other. Do not expect dramatic revelations or immediate transformation. Instead, watch for subtle shifts in your relationship with your own mind, with your physical environment, with the people and world around you. Notice how this simple rhythm, repeated day after day, gradually alters the quality of your attention, the texture of your emotions, the clarity of your perceptions. This is the alchemy of spiritual discipline, not dramatic and sudden, but gentle and cumulative, changing us cell by cell, thought by thought, choice by choice. Remember this truth when your mind craves novelty or your ego demands spectacular results. The extraordinary hides within the ordinary, waiting for faithful attention to reveal it. The peace and clarity you seek will not come through finding the perfect technique or teacher, but through bringing perfect presence to the simple techniques and teachings already available to you. The garden of your soul is already planted with everything needed for your spiritual flourishing. What remains is only the faithful tending, day after ordinary day. Trust in this gentle discipline of attention. Have faith in this cumulative power of small, faithful actions. The order you seek is not imposed from without, but emerges from within as these simple practices gradually align your outer life with your inner truth. This is the faithful discipline of the heart, not rigid control, but loving attention, not desperate striving, but gentle returning again and again to what matters most. I recognize the storm that rages within you, the anger that flares without warning, the grief that ambushes in quiet moments, the anxiety that circles like a predator around your every plan. I see how these emotions exhaust you, how they steal your peace, how they make you a stranger to yourself. I understand the shame that follows their intense visitations, the self-judgment that whispers you should be over it by now, the fear that these feelings will never release their grip on your heart. I have walked this terrain of emotional turbulence myself, have felt the ground shift beneath my feet with each wave of feeling, have questioned whether serenity would ever be more than a distant shore, glimpsed in moments of temporary calm. During the years after my beloved Shams disappeared, taken from me by jealous hands or by his own mysterious choosing, I never knew for certain, I became intimate with the full spectrum of human emotion in its most raw and unfiltered forms. Rage would seize me without warning. So intense I would find myself spinning in the street like a man possessed, frightening those who had known me as composed and dignified. Grief would drown me in the middle of teaching, tears flowing uncontrollably as some small detail, the angle of light through a window, the cadence of a student's question, would suddenly evoke his presence. Fear would paralyze me in the night, the terror that I would never again experience the clarity and communion I had known with him closing around my throat like a tightening noose. I tried what perhaps you have tried, fighting these emotions, reasoning with them, distracting from them, numbing them with whatever methods were available. I would exhaust myself with work, with prayer, with fasting, hoping to outrun or overpower the feelings that seemed determined to consume me. But each suppressed emotion would only gather strength in the shadows, returning with even greater intensity when my defenses weakened. Each denied feeling would simply go underground, emerging later in physical ailments, in dreams of startling violence, in sudden explosions of disproportionate reaction to minor triggers. It was during a period of complete emotional collapse, when I had retreated to a small room on the outskirts of Kanya and could barely function in the world, that an old woman who brought me food each day offered wisdom that would transform my relationship with my emotional life forever. She found me curled on the floor, shaking with sobs, unable to explain even to myself the source of such overwhelming feeling. Instead of offering platitudes or trying to distract me from the pain, she simply sat beside me, placed a weathered hand on my back, and spoke words I will never forget. "You are not meant to master your feelings," she said quietly. "You're meant to witness them, to honor them, to let them move through you like weather through the sky. They bring messages, these difficult emotions, not to torment you, but to guide you toward healing. Listen to them as you would listen to a child crying in the night, not with annoyance or dismissal, but with tenderness and curiosity about what they need you to understand." Her words broke open something in me, not immediately ending the emotional storm, but shifting my relationship to it. I began to approach my feelings differently, not as enemies to be conquered or as shameful weaknesses to be hidden, but as messengers carrying information I needed for my soul's unfolding. Rather than fighting against the current of emotion, I began to float with it, watching where it carried me, noticing what it revealed about the terrain of my inner life. The counterintuitive truth I discovered, which I now offer to you as medicine for your own emotional struggles, is this. Healing comes not through controlling emotions, but through witnessing them with compassion. The very feelings you have been fighting against contain within them the seeds of your liberation, if only you will stop running long enough to receive their wisdom. I developed a practice that gradually transformed my emotional life from a source of suffering to a pathway of deepening awareness. Each time a difficult emotion would arise, anger, grief, fear, shame, I would find a private space and place my hand over my heart, closing my eyes and speaking to the feeling as if addressing a respected messenger. I feel you, anger. I acknowledge your presence. I am listening to what you have come to tell me. Then I would simply stay present with the physical sensations of the emotion in my body, the heat of anger, the heaviness of grief, the tightening of fear, without following the mental stories about what had caused the feeling or what should be done about it. What I discovered through this practice was revolutionary. When given my full, compassionate attention, even the most intense emotions would naturally move through me in waves, cresting and then receding, rather than becoming stuck and persistent. And as each emotion completed its natural cycle, it would leave behind a pearl of wisdom. Anger revealing where a boundary had been violated, grief showing what I truly valued, fear pointing to places requiring greater care or preparation. The very emotions I had been treating as obstacles to peace became, when approached with presence rather than resistance, doorways to deeper understanding. Try this practice the next time you feel overwhelmed by a difficult emotion. Instead of immediately trying to fix, change, or escape the feeling, create 5 minutes of private space. Place one hand on your heart and one on your abdomen. Name the emotion aloud. I am feeling anger. Or, this is grief moving through me. Or, anxiety is present right now. Then simply breathe, feeling the physical sensations of the emotion in your body, watching them with the same curious attention you might give to clouds forming and dissolving in the sky. Notice the changing nature of these sensations, how they intensify, shift, move, and gradually transform. After the 5 minutes, write down any insights or understandings that emerged from this act of emotional witnessing. This practice is not about indulging in emotions or becoming trapped in their stories. It is about allowing feelings to fulfill their natural function, to move energy, to deliver information, to initiate necessary change, rather than interrupting this process through resistance or identification. It is about recognizing that emotions are like water. Their nature is to flow. When we dam them up through denial or fight against their current through resistance, we create the very emotional flooding we fear. When we allow them to move with our conscious witnessing, they naturally find their way to the sea of greater awareness. I learned through years of this practice that the emotional healing we seek is not the absence of difficult feelings, but a changed relationship with all feelings. The heart becomes not an empty vessel purged of emotion, but a spacious vessel capable of holding the full range of human feeling without being overwhelmed by any particular current. Like a vast sky that remains unchanged whether clouds are dark or bright, stormy or serene, the witnessed heart develops a fundamental serenity that exists not despite emotional weather, but alongside it. God's presence revealed itself to me most tangibly in this process, not as an external force suppressing emotional storms, but as the very capacity for witnessing that allowed me to move through them with growing grace. I came to understand that the divine did not expect me to transcend my humanity by rising above emotion, but to fully inhabit my humanity by embracing all emotions with conscious awareness. In my darkest nights of rage or grief or terror, when I remembered to witness rather than resist, I would feel a subtle but unmistakable companionship, as if something vast and compassionate was witnessing alongside me, holding both me and my emotions in a larger field of acceptance. Remember this truth when emotional waves threaten to drown you. The feeling you resist will persist. The feeling you witness will teach. The very emotions you have been treating as obstacles on your spiritual path are actually essential guides, revealing where healing is needed, where growth is possible, where your heart's intelligence is trying to awaken deeper understanding. They are not distractions from the spiritual journey, but intimate aspects of it, as necessary for soul-making as joy or peace or love. Trust in this alchemy of emotional witnessing. Have faith in this paradoxical path where feeling leads to freedom. The order you seek emerges not through controlling or eliminating emotions, but through embracing them with presence and compassion until they reveal their hidden wisdom. This is the faithful discipline of the heart, not to become emotionless, but to become a clear vessel through which all emotions can move and teach and transform, held in the larger awareness that is your true nature. I understand the emptiness that haunts your days, the sense of walking through life without direction or meaning. I've heard the question that keeps you awake in the darkest hours. What am I here for? I know how it feels to fulfill your obligations, to family, to work, to society, while a deeper hunger remains unsatisfied within. I see the weariness in your eyes, the resignation in your shoulders, the quiet desperation of a life that moves forward by momentum alone, without the animating force of genuine purpose. I have walked this desert of meaninglessness myself, have felt the soul's thirst for something more than mere existence, have questioned whether the spark of divine purpose I glimpsed in youth had been merely illusion or self-deception. After the death of my father, I inherited his position as a respected teacher of religion. On the surface, my life appeared complete. I had status, security, the respect of my community, work that served others. Yet, inside, a hollow space expanded with each passing year. I performed my duties with precision and care, but something essential was missing. My words came from memory and training rather than from living truth. My heart remained untouched by the very teachings my lips pronounced. I felt like an actor in an elaborate play, speaking lines written by others, playing a character named Rumi, while the real me remained hidden, unknown even to myself. This divided existence became increasingly painful until the day I met Shams of Tabriz, the wandering mystic who would become both mirror and flame to my soul. Our first encounter shattered all pretense. He looked at me, not with the deference I'd grown accustomed to, but with a penetrating gaze that seemed to bypass all outer trappings and speak directly to the lost soul beneath. "You are a scholar of water," he said to me, "but I see in your eyes that you have never been immersed. Your words describe the ocean, but your bones remain dry. What use is knowledge of depth if one never dives?" His question pierced me like an arrow, striking directly at the truth I had been avoiding. For all my learning, all my teaching, all my careful performance of spiritual duties, I had never fully committed myself to the path I described to others. I had maintained a safe distance from the transformative fire at the heart of the tradition I claimed to represent. I knew the words, but not the music, the map, but not the territory, the doctrine, but not the living reality it pointed toward. What followed was a period of profound unlearning, a stripping away of accumulated knowledge, identity, and security as Shams guided me beyond the realm of concepts into direct experience. We would spend days and nights in conversation, in silence, in ecstatic movement, in contemplative stillness. He would pose paradoxical questions that my rational mind could not resolve, forcing me to access deeper ways of knowing. He would interrupt my habitual patterns with unexpected challenges, preventing me from retreating into the familiar comfort of my scholarly identity. Gradually, painfully, joyfully, I began to awaken to my true purpose, not as a transmitter of second-hand knowledge, but as a vessel through which divine love could express itself in unique form. I came to understand that authentic purpose is never generic or abstract. It emerges from the specific intersection of our deepest joy, our greatest gifts, and the world's most pressing needs. It is discovered not through grand plans or dramatic decisions, but through faithful attention to the subtle call that has been whispering within us all along, beneath the noise of expectation and fear. The paradoxical truth I offer you today, the wisdom earned through my own wandering in the desert of meaninglessness, is this: Your purpose is not something you invent or achieve. It is something you uncover and allow. The unique contribution that only your life can make is already seated within you, waiting not for your striving, but for your surrender, not for your planning, but for your presence. Think of the rose bush in the garden. It does not wake each morning questioning its purpose, debating whether it should try to become an oak tree or a cucumber vine instead. It simply turns toward the sun, drinks the rain, and naturally expresses its rose nature through root and stem and thorn and blossom. Its purpose is not separate from its being. It is the full expression of that being in relationship with the world around it. So it is with human souls. We are born with a unique configuration of gifts, sensitivities, passions, and perspectives, what I came to call our original nature before the world told us who we should be. Our deepest purpose is simply the full expression of this original nature in service to the whole. Not an achievement to reach, but a truth to live. Not a destination to arrive at, but a way of traveling, unique to each soul, as each wave is unique though part of the same vast ocean. During the years following Shams's disappearance, as I struggled to find meaning in his absence, I developed a practice that gradually revealed my own deepest purpose, and that I now offer to you as a pathway toward yours. Each dawn, I would sit in silence and ask 3 questions, listening not with my analytical mind, but with my whole being for the subtle responses that emerged from deeper wisdom. First, what breaks my heart? I would bring to mind the suffering I witnessed in the world around me, noticing which particular forms of pain moved me most deeply, not from guilt or obligation, but from genuine compassion that felt almost like recognition, as if the wound in the world were somehow connected to a corresponding wound within me. Second, what makes my heart sing? I would recall moments of genuine joy and aliveness, times when I lost track of hours because I was so immersed in an activity that seemed to arise from my deepest nature. Not fleeting pleasures or distractions, but experiences that left me feeling more fully myself, more connected to the whole of life. Third, what unique gifts has life placed in my hands to share? I would consider not just my obvious skills or training, but the deeper qualities and perspectives shaped by my particular journey, including my wounds and struggles, my unique combination of experiences, the wisdom earned through my darkest nights and brightest days. As I practiced this reflection day after day, patterns began to emerge. Certain themes appeared across all 3 questions, revealing the unique thread of purpose woven through my life. I discovered that my deepest heartbreak was around the spiritual loneliness of those who yearned for direct connection with the divine, but were trapped in rigid forms or empty concepts. My greatest joy came in creating spaces, through poetry, through movement, through presence, where souls could experience directly the love at the heart of existence. And my unique gifts included not just scholarly knowledge, but an ability to translate ineffable experience into language that could serve as a bridge for others seeking their own direct connection. From this convergence emerged the purpose that would guide my remaining years, not as a teacher of religious doctrine, but as a poet of divine love, using language to point beyond language toward the direct experience that no words can fully capture. This purpose was not separate from my daily responsibilities as father, community member, and human being. Rather, it infused those roles with new meaning, guiding how I showed up within each relationship and context. I invite you to try this practice for yourself. Tomorrow, find 20 minutes of quiet time. Sit with a journal open before you and ask these 3 questions with your whole being. What breaks my heart? What makes my heart sing? What unique gifts has life placed in my hands to share? Write without censoring, allowing whatever emerges to appear on the page. Do not expect immediate clarity about your life purpose. Instead, look for patterns and resonances across your responses, threads that might be woven into a unique tapestry of meaning when viewed together. Repeat this practice for 7 consecutive days, going deeper each time. On the 8th day, read all your responses as a single text, noting themes and connections. Then, write a single paragraph beginning with the words, "My unique purpose in this life may be..." Allow this statement to remain provisional and evolving rather than fixed and final. A compass orientation rather than a destination, a living inquiry rather than a rigid definition. Remember this truth when purpose seems elusive, or when society's narrow definitions of success threaten to pull you from your true path. The seed of your purpose is planted in the soil of your deepest pain and watered by the rain of your purest joy. The very experiences that have broken your heart open may be preparing you for your most authentic contribution. The activities that bring you genuine aliveness are not distractions from your purpose, but clues leading toward it. The unique combination of your wounds and gifts forms a medicine that only your life can administer to a world in need of healing. Trust in this organic unfolding of purpose. Have faith in this mysterious connection between your particular being and the needs of the greater whole. The divine order includes your unique note in its cosmic symphony, not as an afterthought but as an essential voice. This is the faithful discipline of the heart, to listen beneath the noise of should and could for the quiet but persistent call of what your life most deeply wants to become. Then to align your daily choices with that emerging truth, step by humble step. If this message resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation. And leave in the comments, I embrace my unique purpose. This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself. We stand now at a threshold. Behind you lies the familiar terrain of meaningless motion, of purpose sought in all the wrong places, of life measured by standards that never touched your deepest truth. Before you stretches the unmapped territory of authentic becoming, not an easier path perhaps, but one that aligns with the subtle current of meaning flowing beneath all existence. The choice to step across this threshold cannot be made once and for all, but must be renewed with each dawn, each challenge, each moment when fear or convention tempts you back into the known. I walk beside you as one who has stumbled often on this path, who has lost the way and found it again, who knows both the cost and the incomparable value of living from authentic purpose rather than borrowed identity. The world does not need more perfect performances of prescribed roles. It needs more souls awake to their unique thread in the vast tapestry, more lives aligned with the deeper currents of love and healing that flow beneath the surface of our shared existence. Take this final practice with you as a lantern for the journey. Each morning, place your hand on your heart and speak these words. Today, I listen for the subtle call of purpose beneath the noise of expectation. Today, I align my choices with the truth I am still discovering. Today, I offer my unique gifts in service to a world that needs precisely what only I can give. Then, move through your day with that intention as a gentle compass, guiding each interaction, each decision, each moment of presence or distraction. The path of authentic purpose is rarely straight or predictable. It winds through wilderness and wonder alike. There will be days when meaning feels vivid, and days when doubt returns like a familiar fog. Trust the deeper pattern emerging beneath the daily fluctuations. Trust the wisdom of your heart when it resonates with true calling. Trust the divine current that has been carrying you all along through every apparent detour and delay toward the unique expression that only your life can embody. You are not here by accident. Your particular combination of strengths and struggles, joys and sorrows, gifts and limitations forms a medicine the world needs now. Your purpose is not some distant achievement, but a way of being present to each moment with your whole self, allowing the unique music of your soul to play through the instrument of your ordinary life. Listen for that music. Dance to that rhythm. Trust that faithful presence to your own deepest truth is itself the gift the world most needs from you.